Hello and welcome back to We Talk Boxing. This is the post-fight analysis of Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna, which was early hours this morning. Now, overall, it was a very good performance by Ryan Garcia, flooring his man three times in the fight. Up on the scorecards, by a milestone, to be honest. Just looked dominant throughout. He landed more punches and thrown more punches as well. So for me, it was a good performance. But obviously Ryan Garcia's flashy. This was his second fight. Since his absence from boxing due to mental health, and the difference here is that this fight was at 140 pounds instead of 135 pounds. So again, it was his debut fight. His opponent obviously weighed in 139. He was around 140, I think. But it was a good performance. But Garcia coming out early on, absorbing the atmosphere by the crowd, started really fast, sharp. And it was a good start for Garcia. He was pretty much keeping his opponent at bay for the first few couple of rounds. Boxing with crispy, fluidy, like boxing skills, and just landing some looping left hooks and straight rights. In the earlier rounds, which hurt Fortuna. Do you know what I mean? And it was quite evident. Do you know what I mean? At this point, that it was only kind of a matter of time. But you know what I mean? Fortuna, he tried to apply his own pressure to Garcia, but it wasn't really having much effect, really. And you could see as well that he had slightly, in the earlier rounds, he had slightly wider stance as well. Like backtracking on, when Garcia was coming forward, he was kind of backtracking with that wider stance, looking to try and counter Garcia as he was coming in. And also when he was going forward as well, Fortuna, he had a nice tight guard, prepared to take one or two shots in order to try and land one and slow Garcia down, but it didn't really have much effect. His best success was pretty much the lead hook, the right lead hook, because obviously he's southpaw, and that caught obviously Garcia a couple of times throughout the fight and that, but didn't really trouble Garcia, to be honest. And like I says, it was an interesting fight. It was more impressive for Garcia. But Fortuna didn't really have the answers, and at times he was, like I said, he had his wide stance when he was backpedaling and when he was coming forward, high tight guard, and trying to throw decoy shots as well to try and set things up against Garcia. But again, Garcia wasn't having none of it, to be fair. And his boxing skills and his combinations, his speed, and the way he was landing with his punches at will, and he was just dominating. From start to finish, and him keeping Fortuna at bay was the key. And Garcia's jab was very good as well. But Fortuna got dropped three times in the fight, all pretty big knockdowns as well, to be honest, and all very good knockdowns. I think the first one was the left hook to the body, and then the second one straight right to the head, and then obviously the third one as well. That was just a devastating punch as well, and obviously that hurt Fortuna, where this time he did manage to get onto his feet, but the referee, stopped it, and it was a smart stoppage, to be fair, because in the three previous rounds prior to that, he'd been dropped in all rounds, and he wasn't really landing much, wasn't really catching Garcia. If anything, Garcia just looked as if he was just going to inflict more damage, and that was his game plan. He said that in the press conferences. He said he wants to hurt Fortuna. And he wants to hit him with something big to to basically F him up, really. So yeah, it was a good performance. Now, immediately after the fight, obviously Garcia said that he's not going to be going back down to 135 pounds, which is interesting, really, because in my eyes, it hasn't cleared up that division. He hasn't won a world title. He hasn't really been in any big fights at 135 pounds. So my answer to him is why. Now the only obvious reason there is that maybe he's struggling to make weight at 135 pounds Do you know what I mean? So he doesn't really want to put his body through that much trauma, and he probably feels comfortable at 140 pounds as well. So you know what I mean? Him thinking, why should I go down? You know what I mean? Like he might not get the big fights at 135 pounds, and he's just gonna kill himself to make weight and fight against pretty much not nobodies, but people that are not the bigger guys in that division. You know, like bigger names, etc. So he might that's probably what him and his team are thinking, and you know what I mean. If he stays at 140, I've got no qualms there because realistically, you know what I mean. There's some still decent fights there at 140 pounds. Do you know what I mean? So potentially, you know what I mean. Obviously, you've got what's his name, who's just moved up as well. You got Tio as well. He's just moved up to 140 pounds. So that, again, that's a nice straight matchup potentially as well. But both of those guys won't fight each other straight away because obviously Tio's after his next fight, he's gonna look to try and get a world title at that weight, to become two weight world champion. But there's some other good fights. Obviously, you got the Progress, the Ramirez, the Zepeda. You know what I mean? Even Catterall, depending on what happens with Taylor and Catterall, that fight's there as well. You've obviously got the Martin fight as well, which, you know what I mean, the Spanish guy, a fairly decent opponent. Another American, Montana Love, and a lot of these guys are signed with top ranks. So there's some good fights there which can be made. But again, obviously, if someone does get called in the future, I'll do a separate video on that as well. So there's some good fights at 140. He did say, however, he will go back to 135 if only he could get the Tank fight. Now, you know what I mean? What can I say? I'd love him to fight Tank, but I think, you know what I mean? Immediately, for me, Garcia needs a few more fights to get some more durable opponents before taking that Tank fight because, you know what I mean, for me, Tank can box as well, and obviously he's got power. He's the bigger puncher, and with Tank, he loves to set traps, and he will set better traps than what Fortuna did. You know what I mean? And he will entice Garcia to like maybe try and close the distance, and maybe try and put that more pressure on him to set that trap, land that big shot, and it's game over for Garcia. So for me, I'd like Garcia to have a few more fights against durable opponents before taking that fight. But if the fight was made, then I feel as if Garcia does have the skills to potentially frustrate and maybe outbox and, you know what I mean, hurt maybe Tank at times. But I would see that fight at the minute go in the distance, to be fair, because unless one guy, you know what I mean, not shits the bed, but like slips up, I'm not really going to, you know what I mean, I could probably see that fight going the full round. But and if it did go the distance, I'd favour Garcia because, you know what I mean, he's got a very good boxing skills. So has Tank, but he loves to box at range. And if he could keep Tank at range, and you know what I mean, try not to mix it, then he will have more success. Whereas Tank has to get in, he has to guide, he has to gauge that distance. But anyway, I don't want to keep you guys too long. I want to keep this short and brief. I could go on for ages, to be honest. But let me know what your thoughts are, you know what I mean, about this matchup against Fortuna. You know what I mean, how impressed was you with Ryan Garcia? Do you think going up to, you know what I mean, staying at 140 is a smart move? Do you think he should come back down to 135 and try and contest and challenge, you know what I mean, some of the bigger fighters in that division? And who would you like to see him in with next? You know what I mean? So anyway, as usual, please subscribe, like, comment, share for more boxing related content, and I'll see you again. Bless.